So we definitely share the same view. Yeah.
Oh, come on, you're allowed to disagree. We don't have house views here at Bloomberg Intelligence, but okay, fair enough. Ronak, over to you.
I'll give an optimistic 2035 based on NuScale's design.
Oh, wow. Okay, so our clients are definitely seeing it happen. Many of them are seeing it happen quite a bit more quickly than this group here. Scott, we're gonna come to you for last word. When are we going to see the first SMR operational in the U.S., commercial one?
I would take the under on that and say 2035 or possibly even before then.
You have a NuScale on one side, which has the only design that has been approved by the NRC. And what, that's a great milestone. They still don't have a client that has been committed to have a new reactor with them. And then you have Oklo, which is like a more novel technology, like, what we call the Gen 4 technology. And they have all these letters of intent and all these agreements, and they still don't have the permit or the design approved or anything from the NRC as of now, concrete. But the technology is very promising.
The way I'd kind of characterize the report and our call is kind of like prudently optimistic. We're talking about a 60% increase in nuclear capacity. It's a big number, and $350 billion is the cost of that.
3 Mile Island will be in 2027. Then NextEra's Drenano is actually moving along as well. So that probably would be in 2028. They get a lot of support, and so far it seems like they think that technically they could be meeting this. The reactor seems to be in good condition, so we see a lot of support there. But beyond those three, we don't really expect any other candidates.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. This is Rob Barnett, and I would like to welcome you to today's BI Energy Exchange, where we talk about our research and the latest developments in energy markets. Today, we're going to do a special discussion on a recent deep dive that the team on the call put together. We'll drop the link into the chat. If you haven't seen it yet, we would encourage you to take a look, a very provocative piece of research. And so the group that put that together, starting with Scott Levine joining from 731 Lexington. Also in 731 Lex, we've got Ronak Bala, who is an associate helping out with Scott. And then swinging over to Princeton, we've got Nikki Sue and Gabby Privatera, who work on our utilities team. So Scott, you talk about a $350 billion cycle of nuclear investment that could occur between now and 2050, partially propelled by everything that's happening on the AI front. So to kick us off, can you just give us some of the high-level takeaways that you would want folks to know about where nuclear could be headed in the U.S. and more broadly?
Sure. So, the way I'd kind of characterize the report and our call is kind of like prudently optimistic. I know that's a common phrase, but look, saying that this is actually going to happen in and of itself, I think the market obviously is anticipating that. But look, there was a false start with nuclear about 15, 20 years ago. And the risks and costs associated with nuclear, are very substantial. And so, we're saying this is going to happen for real. That's the, kind of bullet point number one. But bullet point, number, and the numbers we're talking about, a 60% increase in nuclear capacity is a big number. And $350 billion is the cost of that. And I can get into some details about what's behind that number. But, those should be taken within the context of Donald Trump calling for a quadrupling of nuclear capacity from 100 to 400 gigawatts, right? So 60% versus 400%, make of that what you will. And then also, we're saying we don't expect a commercial ramp up in the small modular reactors, which we expect to account for the lion's share of the capacity additions to occur until 2035 to 2040. And that compares with some of the comments you're hearing from the SMR companies, which Gabby follows more closely, calling for a ramp up between 2030 and 35, and for some proof of success before 2030 even. And so while we're calling for this to happen and we're expecting substantial growth, take it within the context of some of those guideposts that are out there in the marketplace.
Fantastic. Well, let's, given you mentioned Gabby's coverage on some of the nuclear suppliers, let's swing over to you. And by the way, if you haven't seen it, you can type SMR, the ticker for NuScale, type BECO, check out Gabby's primer on the company. And I will say SMR is a great ticker handle for the company, so kudos to them for grabbing that one. Gabby, frame it for us. How are you thinking about these kinds of names right now, where they've got very long lead time projects and they're building out their pipeline? How do you think about a company like NuScale or Oklo or on down the line?
Yeah, well, thank you again for having us here today. So it's very interesting, to be honest, like to follow these two companies. Like you have a NuScale on one side, which has the only design that has been approved by the NRC. And what, that's a great milestone. They still don't have a client that has been committed to have a new reactor with them. And then you have Oklo, which is like a more novel technology, like, what we call the Gen 4 technology. And they have all these letters of intent and all these agreements, and they still don't have the permit or the design approved or anything from the NRC as of now, concrete. But the technology is very promising. Now, based on that, though, you have to step back and think, all right, so the technology is promising, but it's going to take a long time. There's a lot that needs to happen between now and when the technology reaches commercialization. So it's promising, but like you said, the time for that to happen is still, a long way to go.
Gabby, I don't think too much about the biotech space, but I have a sense that these names are probably analogous, right? If you kind of look, they don't really have much revenue.
Right.
I'm just looking. Looks like NuScale's 11 billion market cap.
Yes.
Oklo's much higher, actually. It looks like it's 20 billion almost. Yep. So. When you kind of think about these names, biotech space, a lot of times the goal is to prove out a drug and then hope one of the big pharma companies buys you. That is often like an exit for a name like that. Do you think there might be analogs here? Do you think these companies just stand on their own, or sort of would longer term maybe a more established player in the energy domain, like a GE Vernova or something? And I know we're not speculating on M&A, but just like could there be a point where some other entity would be interested in owning the IP that these companies are basically creating?
Well, at this point, I don't know anything. It's possible, I guess, right? I don't know. It's hard to tell. I have definitely heard that analogy to the biotech companies, for sure. But I think we have to have always, our feet on the ground. And these companies are definitely betting on the increase of power demand, especially from AI data centers. And we've seen some of that already happening, like we all heard, and Nikki can explain us more about all the deals for the existing nuclear. but so the data points appear to be there. It's just more a matter of developing the technology and get it to the point where they can actually provide some of this for these tech companies. But I mean, anything is possible, right?
Maybe in a sort of follow on just on that idea real quick is just, my general sense is that these SMRs probably, first ones could be late this decade under an optimistic scenario, early next decade. How does revenue recognition likely going to work for these companies? So like when are they actually going to start to have some financials that you can sort of like evaluate?
Yeah,
Any
interesting.
sense?
Yeah, for sure. So if you, I guess we have to again take a step back again because it will depend on the business model that they operate. So let's take as an example NuScale. NuScale, they are a technology vendor, and therefore they're going to be seeing revenue before the power plant or the smaller reactor is in operations, because they're going to have to provide consulting services and all that to actually have the final design for the reactor. So that's a little different, right? And then obviously once the modules get delivered, then the revenue is going to increase. So you're going to see revenue recognition before. And if you check actually their financials, they already have revenue. Still relatively small, of course, but they already have revenue especially for one of the projects that they have overseas. Now, Oklo, on the other hand, they are like owned the power, so they're basically the final product is really power. So then it's a little different, right? So they're more capital intensive, and then therefore they're likely not going to be seeing much of revenue until they have something in operations and they're able to sell the power. So it's different, but I guess they're aiming that therefore they're going to be able to capture some of the price premium for power.
Fantastic. Okay, Nikki, let's get you into the conversation. I'm just looking at your primer for Constellation, and as you state up front, they own about 20% of existing U.S. nuclear capacity in the U.S. And so I'm curious, how do you think about the sort of key utilities that are exposed to this thesis? Are companies like Constellation likely to be the ones that will invest in the next round of nuclear? Which utilities under your sort of portfolio do you think are sort of geared to what may or may not be happening in this space over the coming decades?
I don't think utilities or even these IPPs would be the first movers just because of the risk. And I think based on the conversation we have with the utilities and power companies, they are very consistent on this front. For them to get into a new project, they would like to have some sort of risk guarantee. For example, they want to have state guarantee support to make sure that the project cost and the construction over run risk could be limited, either on the utility side or the IPP side. So it's they're not going to be the first movers, but they will definitely participate, but not the first movers.
There is some discussion in the ether about restarting existing nuclear power plants. I think there was the Microsoft deal with 3 Mile Island and some other sort of things like that. How do you think those things potentially unfold over the next 4 or 5 years?
So far, I think all these three that are scheduled to be bring to we'll be seeing probably 3 of them coming back online. It's the Palisade either late this year or maybe next year, and then most likely 3 Mile Island would be in 2027. Then NextEra's Drenano is actually moving along as well. So that probably would be in 2028. They get a lot of support, and so far it seems like they think that technically they could be meeting this. The reactor seems to be in good condition, so we see a lot of support there. But beyond those three, we don't really expect any other candidates. There was one question from the audience yesterday about the Indian Point possibility of Indian Point. There were a lot of talks about the possibility of Indian Point coming back online, but we don't see that happen. It's less likely, I would say, less likely to happen, just because one, the safety concern, because it's the proximity to New York City, and two, those reactors are also deeper in the decommissioning process, and three, cost, because it's pretty expensive. Holtec has talked about, like, if you want to bring it back, we have to do it now. If we move deeper into the decommissioning process, it's probably not going to happen. And then the cost estimate is 10 billion. And on top of it, New York State do want to bring nuclear, do want to build more nuclear, especially with the offshore wind challenges. They probably do need nuclear to fill some of the capacity need. But for them right now, they are looking at new nuclear. Constellation actually is trying to build nuclear on the upstate 9 Mile Island side, that where they already have a couple nuclear there, and state actually are also trying to look into a 1 gigawatt of new addition. So there's support in New York for new nuclear, but I don't think they have the appetite for Indian Point restarting.
Yeah, fascinating. Kind of be interesting to follow that saga. I share your skepticism. Ronak, let's get you into the conversation. First of all, welcome first time to this call. We're very pleased to have you. I'm wondering if you can give us just a little bit of color on kind of how you're thinking about this space. So what's your expectation on when we're really going to see these projects come to fruition, to give us a sense of the timeline, and any color you can add on. Nikki's already sort of given the sort of view on kind of utilities being a little reticent, but where are these reactors going to be built? Is it a Texas story, a California story, and is it just mainly the AI companies that are doing it? Who's active in the space from your sense?
Yeah, thank you, Rob. So I think there's a number of things. If you think about it from a policy and supply chain standpoint, that's what's going to be driving a lot of this. And certainly with the Trump administration, they've gone ahead and made a number of executive orders, including one such as making NRC review timelines at 18 months. And so that certainly supports a faster approval. To your point with the AI partnerships, we are starting to see some of the contours of that with guys like Google, Amazon, and Oklo working with Kairos, Switch, and Equinix. And so certainly, we're seeing the investment, we're seeing the support from lawmakers. And so to that end, the cadence that we sort of see is 2038 really being when that begins to uptick in terms of the construction. In terms of the locations, we could see this in a number of places, Texas certainly being one of them, but other parts of the US in general. Certainly, it's especially with SMR technology, we're trying to understand where that could be deployed, but it seems like this could be a national build out. You look at what the nuclear posture is right now in the US, most plants are generally in the Northeast, but certainly, we do have a couple in California and in the Midwest in general.
Very interesting. I'm curious on like the policy support angle that you just mentioned, and this idea of getting the NRC to move faster. What do you make? Is that going to be successful? And is there some worry at all in your mind that the next administration will change its mind and go in a different direction? Because I'm just thinking here for a second, the Biden administration was cheerleading solar and wind, electric vehicles, things like that. And I think the sort of story under the the second Trump administration is much more pro-nuclear, much more traditional energy. So Is that policy support sort of critical to the narrative in your view?
Certainly does play an important role. Without policy support, none of this is possible. And so to that end, now at least it seems like that is less so, at least in the near term, a concern, given it has bipartisan support. Donald Trump wants to increase the capacity, by 4 times. He wants to quadruple it. And so, what that looks like right now is a potential 67 billion in subsidies, and the funding of 400 billion for a green bank. And so that could help support some initial projects. In addition to that, there's certainly tax incentives on the IRA side. And so, to that end, policy is less so of a risk right now immediately, though it certainly is a requirement. It's more so the execution on the corporate side, and the continuation of some of this deal making, and some of the groundwork actually being done to start building these.
Fantastic. Okay, Scott, I want to swing back around to you. So Ronak just mentioned a couple of interesting things, and so if a 4x build in nuclear would be going from 100 gigawatts thereabouts to 400 gigawatts, I think you landed at an incremental 60 gigawatts. So you're not buying the full thesis that the administration has put forward. And I want to understand a little bit about your skepticism of why is it a 60% increase versus a 4x increase?
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the model and our assumptions. And the first thing I would say is that we're only modeling through 2050. And so it takes, we're assuming in our $354 billion cost, we're assuming at the outset it takes 10 years and $10,000 per kW. So 10 billion to build a 1 gigawatt full-size nuke, and it takes 10 years to build it, right? And so we're assuming it takes a while to get going. So while we're saying 60 gigawatts by 2050, that's not going to be the end of the build cycle. In all likelihood, we've just modeled it out only through 2050. And we're hitting peak rates of construction spend 20 billion a year toward the end of the build horizon. So, that assuming we're modeling further out, it could indeed very well be much more than 60 gigawatts. That said, really what's driving our model is that we're assuming growth in electricity demand, I think of slightly under 2% a year on a CAGR. And we're assuming that nuclear goes from 18 to 20% of the grid. And if you look at the EIA's projections, they don't assume any additional nuclear capacity, so it naturally goes down. We're at 18 and they have it going down, I think, to something like 15, 16% or so. And so, 18 to 20% may not seem like a huge jump, but, that is what equates and drives effectively our model. And so in the near term, and Nikki can speak to this much better than I can, you have some restarts and some uprating driving some of the growth here. But longer term, it's more of a top-down model that we have driving the growth, and the key drivers there are growth in electricity demand and the percent of the grid that we see this equating to. And so 400 gigawatts, look, Donald Trump, everybody knows, he's for grand statements and everything. But that said, at COP28, the 31 countries adopted a plan for a tripling of global nuclear capacity. And I should mention as well that in our report, we do also have contributions from overseas with Patricio Alvarez in Asia as well. We cover China, Japan, South Korea. They have growth plans there as well. And Biden, I should mention, although certainly was much more supportive of renewable energy, also touted a tripling of capacity as part of his longer term growth plan. So, all of that kind of needs to be taken into consideration here. But, in the first wave of nuclear builds during the first phase of the build cycle, we built essentially 100 gigawatts of capacity, and we haven't really seen any meaningful activity on the new build front for decades. So, take within if you were to double capacity, that in and of itself would be a large statement. We're just trying to put some reasonable expectations there behind what we expect to see at this point in time.
Fantastic. Thank you, Scott. For anyone who still hasn't seen it, I have dropped the link for the deep dive into the chat, so make sure you check that out. And Scott, what you just said raises a great question, and I want to pose it to Nikki. So many of our nuclear power plants in the U.S. are getting elderly, and I know they will have to go through relicensing in order to continue to operate. Can you give us a sense of kind of what's the life duration of a nuclear power plant? Many of the ones in the U.S. were built in the 60s and 70s. Are they going to run all the way out through 2050? What are they going to have to do to keep operating? Kind of how you think about that type of question.
So that's actually a good question. So far, we expect, like in our model, we expect all of the nuclear power plant will run 80 years, because for nuclear power plant, I think they get 80 years license, 40 years license, then they get 20 renewal, then 20 renewal. So they add up to 80 years. So with the market condition right now, unless there's technical issue, otherwise we expect all of them will run the full 80 years. So in our model, we actually only have about 2 gigawatts of retirement. That's for 3 reactors, because they will be reaching the 80 years lifetime. And that's why we have the retirement of 2 gigawatt model in. Other than that, we assume all of them will continue to run through the full life. So they obviously are doing a lot of maintenance, make sure they run smoothly and safely. So the CapEx, they are keeping up right now. Yeah.
Okay, very interesting. Scott, I want to swing back over to you, and I'm curious to get your broad perspective on how you think about investing in this space. Now, and I want to frame it with a few ideas. So one is, we've got a note out this morning looking at AI's impact on the gas market. We've also looked at how it's affecting things like solar and storage. And there is this sort of idea that energy, whether it's nuclear, solar, gas, is sort of a second order effect of all this AI data center build out. It's a pick and shovel angle of the gold rush, right? And at the same time, you're hearing in the sort of general media lots of discussions about an AI bubble. And so I'm curious to get your sense of, do you think these nuclear reactors are going to be online in time to meet all of this AI euphoria? Is your theory or thesis contingent on AI continuing to be this overarching narrative, or there are other drivers out there that are helping to support the nuclear build?
Well, to answer your last question first, yes, I think certainly AI needs to be a sustainable story, and also we need to see a pivot from training to inferencing. That's really what drives the expectation that we'll see a continued CapEx increase on the part of the hyperscalers, right, to support growth, right? And so given the amount of time it takes to build a nuke, or we expect it to take to build a nuke, that needs to be the case for this to happen. And we do think that will be the case, yes. There are some other drivers of growth for power, including the energy transition, reshoring, supporting of industrialization, the industrial greening of the grid, and so on and so forth. And nuclear certainly supports all of that, right? But AI and the data centers, the fact that nuclear is emissions free, number one, and baseload, number two, make it uniquely suitable for that. But that said, so you need to believe that not just the near-term story is viable, but that it's durable, right? In order to give nuclear time. And I think we've seen enough evidence to suggest that will indeed be the case. With regard to looking at how to play the cycle, so certainly Nikki's names, are established names, Constellation, Vistra, et cetera. Those have all, those are owners of nuclear plants. They have experience with this. They don't have the restrictions that a regulated utility would have. And I don't want to, infringe on her, area of expertise, and she can speak to this, right? But they have the most flexibility to capitalize in the near term, right? With regard to Gabby's space, I'll let her deal with that. That's a tall order in terms of you really have to pick the winners, right? And, with nuclear and one of the executive orders that Trump put out there, they're looking to establish a pilot program and within the next year select 3 reactors. And, there's now, this big, push to be one of those 3 that are chosen for the pilot program where you can prove criticality by next July, right? And so, those types of names certainly, within the next year we'll have a better sense of that. You'll have a better indication, I think, of which of the SMRs have the best prospects. Now, also, I think that there's a conventional wisdom that, all the reactors in the US are light water reactors, right? And so you have 2 different types of mini reactors. NuScales has the light water reactor that's Gen 3 plus, and the Gen 4 reactors are something else, and those require type of fuel called HALEU, which is not yet commercially available, certainly not available in abundance yet. So there's a lot of things that kind of play into it, but I think with Nikki's group, you really have that visibility. And the last thing I'd say is that for the contractors that I cover, it's also tricky because, you had such a problem with the one plant that was built. It ended up, changing from 3 different contractors, and Westinghouse ended up buying the nuclear construction business from Chicago Bridge and Iron and going just on that plant alone. So there's a lot of, uncertainty with regard to which contractors would benefit, but I think you might want to look at some nuclear service companies that are not contract related, like Centrus Energy, which, does nuclear fuel, which is up 400% this year. And some of the other guys, Holtec is talking about going public and does remediation work and is potentially going to be an SMR play. But the ones that aren't kind of binary, like you mentioned, the analogy with a biotech stock, right? So unless you have the stomach for an investment like that, and you know something or know enough to play it that way, I would argue for more of the safer, diversified, stories kind of being during this weeding out process as being safer, so to speak.
Very practical wisdom there, Scott. I like it. Okay, Gabby, let's come back around to you and maybe continue on this discussion a little bit. You mentioned X-Energy in your comments earlier, and I think there are numerous other entities out there sort of chasing this idea. So one might be just like, do you anticipate that we'll see some more listings, as companies advance in this space? And then maybe sort of just a philosophical question aligned with some of the comments Scott just made. I'm curious if you can give a sense of do you think we'll end up with 1 or 2 companies that sort of win on the technology front? Is there space for 10 companies or space for 2 companies? Because if they think of traditional nuclear, we only have a few players. If you think gas turbines, we've got a few companies that do gas turbines. So do you think there's just a few companies? And I will note, I don't think we've really talked about fusion yet. So I'm just going to throw fusion at you as well. So how many companies end up in the space? And is there any key to understanding what's happening within the tech space on the nuclear side?
You threw me 4 questions there, Rob. I don't know. Let me see. if I can
Take your
go through
time.
all.
I don't know. It's good. Sorry.
All right, so the first one, are we going to see more listings? So I believe yes, because these startups, they all need capital. And at this point, and they need to go to the NRC, and that costs money. And all the process of in a first of a kind project is very expensive. So yes, and we've seen a lot of these companies go through SPACs to become public, and we've seen some announcements, I think Terrestrial Energy and a couple of others that we've seen out there. So to short answer to your question, yes. Now about how many, I would expect that we are only going to see a few rather than too many. And I really hope that's the case too, because if we want new nuclear to succeed, we need, those few designs and like have like very strong supply chains around them that can bring that, to the next level. If we have, right now we have so many designs all over the place, and each is like pulling to their own, trying to bring theirs to the next level. So it's like it's like running around. I have a 6-year-old, so sorry for the analogy, but it's like going around, all the kids trying to catch up with them in the playground, and they're all going in different directions. So if you have one or a couple of them, we shouldn't say one, but a few of them, then the goal, it becomes more clear, and then the supply chain and everything that needs to happen will happen more easily, I guess, rather than having multiple ones. So I think in the process, from now through 2038, unfortunately, we're probably going to see many of these old couple of 20s or whatever they are, designs are out there. Many of those are just not going to, go to the next level, and just, you probably, I would expect that the light water reactors, just because, there's familiarity to the technology, and like Scott mentioned, they don't need helio, and which is non-existent. They're probably going to be, likely the first ones to move to the next level, and we'll see a couple of, hopefully just a few that will get to the commercialization and can bring the technology to scale.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you for that. So for anyone who didn't see it, we surveyed our clients in late September, and we asked a variety of questions about energy markets, expectations for oil prices, on down the line. And one of the questions we asked, I think is pretty interesting, is when do you expect the first U.S. small modular reactor to reach commercial operations? So I think the results are pretty interesting. I'm going to just share what those are, and then maybe I want to ask each one of you to give us a date, and that will be how we close out. So the group of folks, some of you on this call probably participated. We had about 16% say by 2030. So that's pretty optimistic, pretty aggressive. We had 36% say between 2031 and 2033. We had 24% say between 2034 and 2036. We had 15% say after 2036, and we had 9% say never. So we got some nuclear skeptics in the survey for sure. So, okay, Gabby, let's come back to you first. Where do you peg it? When are we going to see the first SMR operating in the U.S.?
All right, so that's a tricky question. You're saying the first one, or because I think that's what we need to be clear. Are we talking about the first reactor, like the prototype type of thing, the demo, or are we talking scale?
Commercial, actually connected to the grid.
So at scale, after 2035.
Okay. Nikki, over to you. What do you think? After 2035, what's your guess?
Well, of course, it's the same. I have the same view as Gabby. We have the nuclear model these production, the commercial service day. So we definitely I share the same view. Yeah.
Oh, come on, you're allowed to disagree. We don't have house views here at Bloomberg Intelligence, but okay, fair enough. Ronak, over to you.
I'll give an optimistic 2035 based on NuScale's design.
Oh, wow. Okay, so our clients are definitely seeing many of them are seeing it happen quite a bit more quickly than this group here. Scott, we're gonna come to you for last word. When are we going to see the first SMR operational in the U.S. commercial one? And give us the final takeaway. What do you want people to go and think about on this topic over the next days and weeks as they continue to kind of decide how to play this?
I guess the first question I have is, so we're talking about a successful demo project?
Sure. Yeah. Demo would count.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, no, I would take the under on that and say 2035 or possibly even before then. But there's a difference between demo and commercialization. And the thing that I would,
a scale demo, let's a 1 or 2 megawatt reactor doesn't count. It's got to be tens of megawatts or something like that.
Yeah, no, I think it's probably before 2035. But at that point, there's also there's so many other things that need to factor in to a commercial reactor being online. You need to have somebody who's comfortable enough to invest in the thing to get it done, as opposed to having government money behind it, so on and so forth. So if we're taught, that's a difference between, a demo project. And so proving out the technology, I think certainly before 2035, yes. And the other thing I'd say is, we say in our model 2038, we're talking commercial scale. That's ramping up. Units coming off the line. And, at that particular point in time, the technology itself could be proven years before. The manufacturing capability and being remotely able to deliver on time, on budget, even years before that. So I think certainly for a successful demo, I think pre-2035. In terms of the initial one, yeah, I'd say 2035. I agree with Ronak there. Yeah, no, in commercial scale, 2038. But to answer your last question as well regarding the key takeaway here is we really kind of debated the front page bullets pretty substantially, and I feel like the first bullet about the nuclear renaissance being for real could be perceived as a generic statement, and it shouldn't be. If you go back 20 years ago, the Vogtle project was green lighted in 2008, 2009. Obama was the president. They put $8 billion behind it, and there was a huge push for nuclear. And I remember a lot of these contractors and the nuclear stocks just ripped in 2007 on unbridled enthusiasm. And what happened? What derailed that? Well, two things. Number one, even before Vogtle turned into a fiasco, number one, you had the shale revolution, which wasn't evident yet in 2007, was a huge negative for nuclear. And then Fukushima, right, in 2011, were two exogenous death blows for the nuclear story, right? So, that were to happen, I wouldn't discount the possibility of that happening, but you have no idea, right? You didn't know about COVID in 2018. And so, don't discount, and that has nothing to say with regard to Vogtle, running 2x over budget. So, saying that we think this is going to be happening, I think in and of itself is a strong statement. And even if, our 60% ends up being conservative or even aggressive, there's a lot of money to be made if this actually happens. And I wouldn't discount that as well. And so, yeah, we're in kind of enthusiastic days and you're at the early stages and there's a lot of excitement. But as we go forward, assuming that there's no exogenous shocks and this story actually happens, I think it's pretty exciting.
Fantastic. It's very interesting. We didn't talk about climate objectives at all or very much on this call, right? And, maybe I'll just add that if you are one of these people that think that governments are going to continue to push us towards net zero, I definitely think it's very hard to imagine a net zero world without quite a bit of nuclear in the mix. So that certainly is supportive of your thesis. I will note here for everyone listening, every one of us is a green dot on the terminal. Judith and IB, we're happy to follow up with you individually if you've got specific questions. If you want to talk further with any one of us, just ping us. We're happy to oblige and chat more deeply on these topics. If you had questions we didn't get to, I know there was a few questions in the chat. We did not have an opportunity to address all of them, so apologize for that. But just reach out. And maybe just a quick advertisement. Many of you are already members of our client chats around energy. We have the BI Energy Exchange and the BI Future of Energy chat. There's robust discussions in those chats daily, not just from us, but from you all. And check those. Send us if you want to be added to those chats. Send us an IB or reach out over email. We're happy to help you get sorted to get into those chats. And then last but not least, we host these calls every Wednesday at 10 a.m. New York. And next week, we're going to have Vince Piazza, Talon Custer, Matt DiMarino on to discuss gas. They've got a focus idea out on gas. Very interesting. So if you haven't seen their focus idea, you should check it out. And yeah, we're happy to get you the details on how to join next week if you'd like to participate in that as well. And so with that, we'll go ahead and conclude this. And I hope you have a great rest of your week. Thank you, everyone. Cheers. Goodbye.